One of the things about traumatic memory is, and I think this is something that there's a really strong consensus on, is that we need to be in the present moment while we're working with the past. So, the last several weeks, as we've been working with our strengths and just generally speaking, the work that we do with the inquiries and the relaxation and meditations in the morning, and all of the work we do is all about knowing our body, being familiar with our body and what's going on. We're learning about trauma responses, how that works. Big benefit of that is that we stop blaming ourselves for having a fight, flight, freeze system. We have a survival system and a mechanism that's our primitive brain is driving that. And so as we understand some of that, it becomes a little bit easier to handle it and move through it without going into shame about it or something like that. The main principle, the reason why we do tapping or put things into a frame, all of that is because if we don't have some way to stay present in this moment, then we're getting kind of sucked back in and we're reliving an experience. We're not witnessing it. And in order to release the stickiness and the trauma out of something, we need to be able to be aware that we're here and we're safe and we're in our body right now. And that whatever it is that we're thinking about or the memories that are coming up are from the past. We're not actually in danger. We're not actually being hurt in this moment. And we want to have that really intimate experience with the memory because it is something that is internal to us. This is our memory. This is our experience in the past. So we're not trying to bypass it or get out of it or get away from it at all. But all of this trauma is stored in the body, and that's why we work so much in the body. So, what we know about triggers or activation is that our nervous system responds to experience. And if we've had a lot of experience in the past of being hurt or in danger or fear, then we're going to have a more sensitively tuned nervous system. If we have an experience of, we're holding our breath, we're in a lot of fear, we're triggered into a rage response or something like that, it's because of the experiences that we've had in the past. And that's the way our body's supposed to work. We have this emotional flooding that happens. Our brain gets flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. And the reason for that is so that we can respond to an active threat. So the problem with that is that a lot of the time the threat is in our memory. It's a memory of something that went wrong. It's not a present moment experience. So we get stuck on the cortisol and the adrenaline rush. And so, as we're getting to know ourselves and we're becoming really familiar with our system and how it operates, then we know what our triggers are and how to downregulate. So, I wanted to take a moment now to stop, and you can feel into it and then kind of write down it as it's coming to you. So, what is it that helps? What is it that you do when you're feeling scared or off kilter or not quite yourself? What are some of the things that you do? It could be you take a breath, it could be that you pet your dog. Just make a mental note or jot down a few things. These are things that help when I feel scared or off kilter. And also think of some things that help to calm you down. When you're feeling triggered or when you're feeling anxious about something, what are things that calm you down and help you to feel happier? So they could be some of those same things. So there's kind of like an emergency, let me get back from panic down to some kind of regulation. But then what actually takes you from just kind of getting by to really loving it, really loving your experience that you really enjoy. Maybe you listen to music or go swimming or dancing or have a good conversation, whatever it might be. Just remind yourself what are some of those things. And another similar element that's a little bit different too is, what is it that helps you get out of compulsively thinking? Kind of gets you back in your body, aware of your breath. Some people might use box breathing or 478, or use the 5 4 3 2 1 senses practice, or read out loud. Or what is it that helps when you have a really strong, compelling train of thought? What helps you to turn away from that and come back to your body and your breath? And so now we're working with trauma that's stored in our body. We're looking at that specifically. So the unconscious, the subconscious, all of that is stored in energy, sensations, feelings in our body. It gets kind of velcroed in there so that our memories are associated with certain feelings in our body, traumatic memory in particular. So we could just acknowledge that we've had experiences where we were really scared, especially if there was a high level of threat or an ongoing long level of threat. And that's why we developed a system to not have to feel that. So if you're 7 or 8 years old and someone in your house is raging and you're afraid for your life, you don't have the opportunity to go get a job and go support yourself. So mostly what people do is they do some kind of freeze or go into a fight response. Our system develops a way to protect us so that we don't have to feel that way. Feeling helpless and powerless is really distressing. It feels very threatening. So what is it that we do? We go into the flight, fight, freeze. So if we can get away from it, we do. And some kids will develop a pattern of never being home. They just, they eat supper over at a friend's house whenever they can, or, they kind of adopt themselves into someone else's family unofficially. Other kids might go more into a freeze where they just kind of stay in their room all the time, or they start doing video games, or they get into some kind of a frozen state where it doesn't matter so much, or even dissociate where we're just kind of daydreaming, we're not really here. And other times people go into more of an anger response. So nobody's going to do that to me. And we get into some kind of a fight response. So these are common responses. They're trauma responses. They're not a commentary on our worth as a person or how ethical we are or anything else. These are just when we feel threatened, we have these responses. So if you have hypoarousal or numbness, these are some of the ways it comes up. Sometimes when I remember in the past, a really close person to me told me that he was going to be not leaving the way he planned to. He was on the road traveling, and then he was going to come back. And I'm just like, oh yeah, good. And then he asked a couple minutes later. He says, "So, aren't you happy that I'm going to be here again?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah." And I wasn't letting myself feel that because I was just in such a state of freeze all the time. And so there might be something like that for you where you notice that there's kind of a dullness, or you're not really reacting to the hard parts, but you also don't have a lot of access to the joy either. Not remembering things is another good example where people say they talk about that time when this happened, and we're just like, I have no memory of that at all. Or we remember things differently. One of the things that can happen when we're really shut down is that it takes us a little bit of time. We need to kind of be alone usually, or have a little bit of a gap. And sometimes it's a long gap. We might not even know what's going on. I think that's one of the things about chronic stress, is that often we have no idea what's really going on. We just know that we're stressed. And then as we learn these tools and we start to become more present in our body, we know how to self regulate with our breath. We come back into the body, we get a lot more information. But it still might not be fast enough to kind of respond on the spot. We still might go, okay, I noticed that in that interaction I had with that person earlier today, I was upset. So what's that about? And then we kind of go into our body and we start to feel it more quickly. There's often a lag. That's also very common with trauma. So Peter Levine talks about titrating and that we need to take things slow. So when we're talking about trauma and traumatic memories, we need to manage the feelings in our body and be able to look to see what the Velcro is. So the Velcro is something in Scott Killaby's work in the Killaby inquiries. Whatever the sensation or feeling is in the body, and then there's associated memories. And it's those two together that are Velcro together that make it seem so intense. So one of the things that we do is we break it down into words and into pictures, and we're always coming back into being in the body so that we can take it slow and we can go, okay, what does this particular picture or image mean? Like we might do the boomerang, say, what does it mean about me? Or we might kind of sit with that picture and do some tapping on it so that it loses its intensity and then we have a chance to come back into the body. So there's a lot of different ways that this works. It's not kind of a 1, 2, 3 in a sense, but I wanted to introduce a new tool today that's very effective in working with the images, the words, especially if you have a lot of things coming at you at once. Scott calls this the laser inquiry. But we're going to do an inquiry, and we're not going to pick the biggest thing, that the most distressing thing, because we're in a group where we're not in a private facilitation. We'll each pick something that comes up that's got some kind of level of charge on it. And then when we have pictures and words come up, we're going to kind of put them like they're in a frame. You can do this with your eyes open. You can put them across the room. You can kind of just do this with your eyes closed. You can have your hands up right at the beginning if you want, kind of frame the picture with your hands. But we're just going to start putting things up there. So this is just an example, and I didn't want to use pictures of real people because I thought that might be distracting. But this is an example as if we're looking at some kind of energy in the body or some kind of something around addiction or something. We might just start looking, and then we have associations. So we might not be looking at our job, but then we get into some image comes in or some memory comes in. So we have these things that are kind of clustered around a theme. And that's what we're going to do with this. We're going to just kind of put everything up like it's on a big whiteboard or in a frame of some kind. And we just keep adding the words and pictures to the frame. And as we're doing that, there might be new pictures that come in. There's different sentences. There's, I feel a knot in my gut now. We have all of these different thoughts that come in. So the ones that seem kind of interesting enough to kind of put up on there, so just keep putting them up, and it might get kind of busy and you don't have to remember everything that's on there. Some things will come on and they'll kind of crowd out everything else. See if you can kind of keep that frame and stay really present with the sensation in your body. I'll walk you through this so you don't have to remember all this. We're just kind of mapping out the territory. One of the differences here is as we breathe in, we're going to focus on the words and pictures in the frame. And then as we breathe out, we're going to focus on the space on the outside of the frame. So that's a little bit different than what we might normally do. So this is the thing. You can put your hands up so that you can kind of feel in your body, and then as you're looking at it, as you're breathing in, you're looking at the content in the frame, and as you're breathing out, you're looking at space all around the frame. And sometimes the whole frame will change size. So if it changes size, just let your hands change size with it. And you can do this with your physical hands, or you can just kind of imagine that you have hands holding it. But I think in some ways it's more interesting or more powerful to use your physical hands. And then we're going to go into being present in our heart.